Nabyl está un poquito un tema de la garganta, así que vamos a tratar de no abusar de él. Nabyl, welcome again. Pleased to have you here.
Well,
It's all yours.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everybody coming this morning. Thank you, Catalina and Francisco, for putting this together. I'm going to try and keep it short so that we can have more time for questions afterwards. So I'm going to start very quickly by giving you a little background because you'll understand the story better. So I grew up in Kenya, in Africa, and I left Kenya when I was 15 years old. Went to Canada to go to school. Like you heard, my background is in mathematics, computer science. And what ended up happening after school is I ended up joining a company that built the first SMS billing platforms for the telcos. So in the late 90s, people were starting to use SMS and text messages, but the telcos did not know how to charge you for it. So we had to build systems on how to do SMS billing, downloadable ringtones, things like that. And then I started another company that did voice over IP for call centers, and a company called Convergence bought that company in 2006 in Florida. So I sold that company in 2006. I ended up in Miami, and that's where the story of Rocker started, about 2009. So what ended up happening is I was in Miami, and a lot of people would come to me and say, hey, you built and sold a technology company, can you help me? So what that really meant was, can you give me some money and leave me alone, right? So I started doing that. I started investing, in a startup, and I realized very quickly that it was a good way to lose a lot of money. Right? But it wasn't because the ideas were bad or because people were trying to, steal your money. It's that there is a special way to look at an idea when it's backed by technology to actually create a business out of it. So in one of those investments, I met Herman, who's my partner, and we started Walker together. And the idea was, we have the expertise. My background is technology, computer science. Herman's background was, economics, mobile strategy, consulting. So we said, look, instead of investing in these companies, just money, let us invest our expertise and our time to help these companies actually become real. And that became the start of what we're doing today, right? And what we realized very quickly is we are actually living in the most extraordinary time in human history. And that's, that sounds like fancy words, but why? Why are we living in the most important time in human history? And you start looking at things, each of us today, with the phones that we carry on our table, the access we have to the internet, we have more power today than presidents, countries, big corporations had even 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So today we have access to all this information that gives us the ability to be extraordinary. And I'm going to try a little grasp, but I really want you guys to look at this because this is the basis of the scale of change that is happening in the world today. So, how many of you are familiar with Moore's Law? So Moore's Law is very simply says that the processing capacity of computing power doubles every 18 months. So what that means is computer chips get smaller, they can be faster, they process more things, but more importantly, they get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So we're able to buy phones for $50 to $1,500. But what this is really saying is, in the 1975 to 1985 period, we had, Apple released the Apple Mac II. And for $1,000, you would be able to buy the Apple Mac II, which had the processing power of, pretty much, calculator today, right? And then if you move forward, 2001, when we started getting laptops that were more powerful, $1,000 bought you the processing power of one insect brain. So from 1900 to 2001, there was very little change. That's 100 years. But from 2001 to 2010, the same $1,000 buys you computing power of nearly a mouse brain. So you go from an insect brain to a mouse brain, pretty big jump. And then the prediction is that by 2023, the same $1,000 is going to buy the processing power, which is equivalent to one human brain. So you start seeing that, the technology is getting faster, it's getting cheaper, and it's getting smaller. And this is driving a lot of change. So I like to say, we as humans, we haven't had an upgrade in 50 million years, right? Humans are not evolved beyond a certain stage. However, through our capacity, we're able to create what we call exponential technologies. And what are exponential technologies? These are technologies that are doubling in speed, they're halving in cost, and they're becoming more powerful year after year. So that's why even though humans haven't changed, we're able to create things like 3D printing, or nanotechnology, or sensors, biotech, right? We are starting to see AI and robotics become a big part of industry, even though, they seem like technologies that are difficult to build. Now, the reason we're living in the most important time in history is if you look back, right, there was the Industrial Revolution that started, everything from the steam engines to factories to being able to ship things around the world. And that was one thing that basically changed the way the world did commerce. But where we are today, you have all these technologies. And the interesting thing is they're not happening one at a time. We have a point in history where these technologies are all occurring at the same time. So you're seeing artificial intelligence being used with healthcare, right? You're seeing robotics and 3D printing being used to manufacture cars. So you're seeing these technologies intersect to create new industries that before weren't possible. So the big jump, obviously, is in technological progress, right? Technologies across the board are growing. You start seeing, things like healthcare leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning to detect cancer. And you start seeing the possibilities of how technology can actually help industry. So if you think about, even 5 years ago, the way cancer was detected is, people would do a biopsy, they would send it off to a hospital. Somebody would have to sit in front of a micron telescope and look at, minute particles of cells to detect cancer, which is a very inefficient process. Today, that same process is they do the biopsy, they send it off in a machine that does computer vision and machine learning detects cancer. So you start thinking about the human. The human gets tired, right? They're looking through a microscope. How much can they do in one day? A machine doesn't get tired, and it learns. So the technological progress is what's really driving a lot of this change. And then the other big thing is, as we said earlier, 4 billion new people are going to come online on the internet. And it seems, like staggering numbers, but as of today, there's already 4 billion people connected to the internet. So we're basically saying the entire population of the world is going to be online in the next 5 to 8 years. So what does that mean? Right? So yes, the thing everybody automatically starts thinking about is, yes, it's trillions of dollars of e-commerce, right? But what it's actually doing is you're starting to create a society where people want and are able to participate for the first time in a global economy, right? So everything from people wanting to be idea creators, from people wanting to be developers, from people wanting to create their own businesses, this connection or this ability to access the internet is one of the big reasons why the world is able to now transact across borders, right? So the other thing that is giving rise to is entrepreneurship. So the big thing that happens once when you combine the technology and the access to the internet is the traditional economic model that everybody learns starts breaking. And what do I mean by that? So what everybody learned in school was economics is driven by supply and demand, right? So if you had a farm or you were growing cotton, you would limit the supply of cotton. You would have to find a partner that could take the cotton to the port. The guys at the port would have to be partners to ship it. And then you have to have this whole ecosystem that you could control by controlling supply and demand. But with so many people coming online and so many people being connected, what has changed is we're shifting from this supply and demand economics to an abundance of information. It's becoming an information-driven economy. So it's starting to democratize the access people have to different information. So you think about, like a kid growing up in Kenya today has access to the same Stanford University courses, to the same iTunes University, to TED Talks, to YouTube videos. They're learning the same thing that a kid is learning in San Francisco, or at Stanford, or here, or in Bombay. So basically the world's intelligence is collectively rising because we all have access to the same information. And when you have access to the same information, it's harder for companies to brand or sell to you because you know the truth. So you start thinking about things like, we were talking the other day to a brand, and they said, look, we have a niche. We have 100 million people that use our soap, right? Their parents used our soap, their grandparents used our soap, their kids are probably going to use our soap. But then you start looking at the scale of this, right? So yeah, you have 100 million users today, but the internet is going to be 8 billion people. 8 billion people who talk to each other, who in one review can say that soap is terrible, it's too expensive, this brand is better, and it's cheaper, and it's going to be flown by a drone to your house. So do you really have a brand at that point? Are you a very small niche market that you need to do something to now change and how to deal with this new phenomenon of so many people being connected? The other big thing that's changing is that while all these people are coming online, the bandwidth or the speed at which people are accessing information is getting faster and faster and faster. How many people here had some of the first modems? The one where you plug into a telephone line and you're dialing to the internet. How fast was it? 9K per 14.4 kilobytes per second. Today, if kids don't get speeds of a couple of megabytes a second, they're complaining. I have a young, 7-year-old son, and if Netflix stops, downloading, he gets upset, right? And this is the world we're living today, where the expectation of speed is driving consumer behavior. So the bandwidth of data that is being able to be transacted is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. 5G is the new technology everyone's talking about deploying, but in general, over fiber, over 5G, over landline, the speed at which people are able to access the internet, to access information, to transact with each other, is really driving a lot of the commerce, right? The other big thing is there's an abundance of capital. So for the first time, because you are able to build these things with the access of technology, it's becoming easier to access capital. So if you just look at a simple example, the first company that I built, we were doing work with a telecommunications company. At that point in time, for a few kids, which I was very young at that time, to have to go out and buy servers, to have to go out and buy connectivity to the internet, to have to buy simple things like Ethernet cables were expensive. And you fast forward that to the companies we're seeing today. You could be 3 kids in Africa or in Bogota or in here. You can access Google for free. You can get a cloud server on Amazon for $7 a month. You can access IBM's artificial intelligence engine for free. So all of a sudden, you have 3 kids in a garage somewhere, for real this time, that can actually solve or tackle the same problems that big companies or big governments are tackling. So all of a sudden, the competition is coming from everywhere, not just big companies. The other thing that's happening is, as investors or as people in the world start seeing this, they want to be part of that ecosystem. So how many people here, for example, own Uber in their portfolio, or own Netflix, or own Hulu, or own Spotify, or I can go on and on and on. How many people own them? It's very difficult to get access to those types of companies early on, because in the beginning, even 10 years ago, it was hard to access those companies. But now, with the crowdfunding, with the blockchain, with things like that, investors from all around the world are starting to get access to these companies really early on. And they need a way to evaluate them, of course, but there's, they say by 2023, there's going to be $300 billion of crowdfunding available. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you're going to be able to access funding to build your idea. and you have access to the technology. So the big thing, that everyone says is, okay, I get it, the world is changing. But what people don't really understand is, based on all these factors, is that the rate of that change is much faster than anybody ever imagines. So let's just recap, right? So in 2010, there was 1.8 billion people on the internet. And just to give you a scale of time, it took 16 years to get the first billion people onto the internet. 16 years. But then you go from 2010 to today, we added about 3 billion people in 8 years. And what's happening now is they're saying every year we're going to add about 2.7 billion people to the internet. So the rate of that adoption is increasing very quickly. And just some interesting stats, right? They say on average around the world, each person spends about 6 hours and 42 minutes online. 6 hours and 42 minutes online on average we are spending. If you look at that in a bigger scale, that's 100 days a year of our lives we are spending on the internet. 4 billion people today connected. 4 billion people spending 100 days of their lives on the internet. This year alone, humanity is going to spend 1.2 billion years on the internet. So the amount of time and energy we're spending on the internet is growing tremendously. And what it's actually doing is it's changing how society is evolving, right? Almost, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but almost 1 billion people online today are simply online to watch other people play games. Just think about that for a second. They're not even playing their own games, but 1 billion people go online to watch other people play games. This is an industry nobody even thought existed 4 years ago, right? How many of you are familiar with Twitch? Twitch was a platform where people would go online and play shooter games, and someone decided to, make that available to other people to watch, and they got acquired by Yahoo for $1 billion about a year and a half into existence, right? This year alone, 700 million people are going to watch esports. And if you guys are familiar with esports, I was in Vegas a few weeks ago, and there was thousands of kids walking around carrying little monitors and little computers, and they were packing stadiums. And what these kids were playing was a game called Street Fighter, but there was thousands of people there, and 100 and something million people watched the finals of a Street Fighter competition. So the way people are using the internet, are watching or consuming data, is completely changing the society that we live in, right? So in this type of world, where an education in a specific industry is no longer really relevant because you learn things as you're going, right? Through the advances of healthcare and exponential technologies, they're extending the lifespan, right? They say if you're healthy for the next 10 to 12 years, you will probably live into your mid-100s, 123. So if you think about that, we're extending the lifespan tremendously in just a short period of time, right? The cost of everything is trending towards zero. So you think about companies like Google, like Facebook, like Amazon now, right? Apple. They are all in a race for you to spend more time on the internet, on their devices, on their networks, and on their platforms, right? We had a conversation a few years ago with a team from Google, and they have this thing called a toothbrush test. So the way they look at ideas and the way they look at things is someone going to use this app, or is someone going to use this platform the way they would brush their teeth? Meaning, are they going to go on my device for at least 2 minutes a day, twice a day? Because they don't care about the revenue per se. They don't care about anything else. They want to make sure you are using the platform. So it's changing the way people start thinking about society, skill sets, right? In the past they talked about first you needed to have skills to actually be a productive part of society. Then it became you need IQ. Then it became you need emotional quotient to be able to deal with people. Now the new thing is, what do you teach your kids? What world are they going to live in? What do they go to school for? Right? So now the new thing is adaptability. They have to have enough kind of understanding to adapt to where the world is going. So you start thinking about this sort of society, what type of company, what type of industry is going to be able to survive this change that's occurring. Which is, a lot of what we do, which is talking about innovation. So when you start thinking about innovation, it also changes compared to even 5 years ago. Because now you're dealing with a lot of people connected on the internet, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of people that want to transact in ways that are different from the traditional business that you're used to doing. So you start seeing competition arrive from orthogonal forces. How many of you are familiar with the story of Kodak? So in the 70s, right, they had an engineer at Kodak who came to the boardroom and he had a box about this big and he said, this is a digital camera, right? And it was half a megapixel. It was only black and white. And the board laughed him out of the room. And he kept coming back year after year, and year after year, the box started getting smaller, and smaller, and smaller, but they never paid any attention to it. So when you're Kodak, and I don't know if you guys remember this, but when I was growing up, and my parents took a picture, if you didn't smile the right way, or if you kind of moved, you got in trouble, right? You got in trouble because they had to take another picture. Now, and as you start thinking about that, what Kodak ended up saying was, hey, we're not in this digital camera business. We're a chemical and we're a paper company. Because what was really their business was people printing those pictures. And you have to go to this, the photography store, get it printed, right? So while this was happening, and this guy was building smaller and smaller computers, the digital camera arrived, right? And the first digital cameras in the early to mid 90s were expensive. They were, this big, about the size, maybe smaller than the laptop. They cost at that time in the US about $1,000 when they became commercially available, which was okay. But what happened is, when you went to buy that digital camera for $1,000, you had to spend another $400 for the memory card that went in the camera so you could store your pictures. So still there was no impact to Kodak. What started happening though, is as we talked about, technology gets cheaper, it gets faster, and it gets smaller. So what started happening is the digital camera started shrinking. It started shrinking, it started having more megapixels, but what was even more important is that the memory card started getting smaller and smaller too. Towards the late 90s, what started happening is you would go to buy a digital camera, it was pretty small by that point, and they would give you a compact flash card for free. They started giving away the storage device. So what started happening? The way people started behaving changed. Now you could take 100 pictures. It didn't matter because the storage was starting to get cheap. And you would pick the ones that you wanted to print, right? And still Kodak didn't do anything. What started happening after that is you think about the iPhone. You fast forward to 2007. The camera, which was a device, completely disappeared. Right? It became a button on your phone that you click, which is, now the death of Kodak, right? They're trying to do other things. But what ended up happening even beyond that is you see Instagram. Instagram is built by two guys who have no idea how a camera worked. They're the biggest photography app on the planet. They didn't have to know anything about cameras. They didn't have to know anything about how mobile phones worked. All they did that made Instagram so attractive to users is they allowed you to put filters on pictures. So you just start thinking about that. Even if, in 2000 or 2005, say you had a wedding and you had, pictures, you would have to take it to a professional to get it touched up so that you look better. It was expensive. Now everybody is an artist. Everybody wants to take selfies because they can make themselves look better. So technology shrunk to such a point that it disappeared into an app on your phone. So with all these changes, how do you deal with innovation? And it's given rise to different types of innovation. So the big thing that's changed is people are starting to build companies together. So it's the rise of the company builders, where people without access before to technology, to money, to resources, can now come together to build their own companies, right? Entrepreneurship is truly global now. For example, we do a lot of stuff with machine learning and computer vision. And even 7 years ago, if someone would have said, hey, I want to find somebody that can use computer vision to detect whether there's a male or a female in this picture, I wouldn't know where to go. And I was pretty tech savvy, right? But just the past 7 years, you have access to talent all over the world. So we were able to find people in the Ukraine who knew how to do, machine learning, matching them with people out of Colombia who knew how to do computer vision. And all of a sudden, you're starting to build teams around the world that have complementary skill sets that are able to build things much faster and cheaper than ever. So the collaboration becomes much more global. And the interesting thing here is the second part of that sentence, which is iteration. It's become cheap to experiment, right? It's become cheap to try something, to code something, to go out there. You think about traditional advertising, and Herman tells this story all the time. There was an ad campaign where Volkswagen wanted to be, very innovative, right? So they said, we're going to print these big banners and put them on bus shelters. And we're going to have QR codes on these bus shelters, so people click them and we'll take them to the Volkswagen site. What ended up happening is they spent, I think, over $10 million on this campaign, but they printed the wrong QR code. They printed the wrong QR code and plastered it all over the city. They wasted $10 million. In today's internet, you don't have to do that. You have a lot of people that will test your product in real time, give you feedback, allow you to take their feedback, adapt it and change it to move on. We were working on an online real-time deal site, like a Groupon. And it was going well, but we weren't getting, we were getting a lot of people coming to the site, but people weren't buying. And we had the designers and everybody, and the designers were, they designed this, and the buy button where you click buy was green. Because everybody said, hey, look, green is very welcoming, it's a color of money. You click on green, people are going to buy. And we were sitting in a room one day, and someone said, hey, let's just try different colors. So we ran what's called A/B testing, where half the people that came to the site were shown a green button, and half the people that came to the site were shown a blue button. And we realized in a span of about 6 hours that people were clicking the blue button. And we changed all the buttons to blue. So every time someone showed up, it was a blue button. And sales went from about a 7% conversion rate to 70% conversion. If you weren't in this mode where testing or that iteration was so easy, we would have probably folded that business. But we're living in a time where you can do quick iteration and actually learn something quickly. And what's happening, especially with us in our business, is you can make smarter early stage investments. So if you remember what I said before, when we first started, making investments, we didn't have all the information to make these investments. But now, when you think about all these factors, you can actually develop an investment thesis that is based on what we call the exponential technology. Is the company, is the industry that you're building, is it future-proof in terms of the types of technologies it is using to you basically get to the end consumer? So all this is great, right? But this future is not fully put together, right? So everything from the internet infrastructure to speed is still improving on a daily basis. But if you're an entrepreneur or a corporation, the path on my right or your left is what it traditionally looks like for everybody. You think you have a good idea, right? Everyone's like, I have a great idea, right? I need to make it happen. Who do I know? So when you look at, and we talk to entrepreneurs all the time, we talk to corporations, and you always hear two stories. It's like, I have this great idea, my roommate or my son's, my nephew knows how to code HTML pages, he's going to be my developer, and my dad will give me $50,000, and this is how we're going to build this company. right? Or we talk to innovation teams all the time. And we sit down with the innovation team at a company and we say, okay, show me what you built in the last month. Oh, no. Innovation is a process, right? We have a 1-year plan and then a 2-year plan. So come back in about a year and we'll show you what we built. In today's world, that's not how innovation works. You're going down this left path, which is not where the world is going. So what it should look like is you have all these people that are eager to participate, people that are eager to give you feedback, people that, like, think about an eBay, right, or Netflix. No, like people in the beginning when Netflix just reduced their rating system to thumbs up, thumbs down in a match, they basically said this is useless. Like nobody's going to do this. People are going to lie. They're going to just give fake reviews. But over the past 7 years, the world is telling Netflix what shows they want to watch. Using the data, Netflix realized that they have a lot of international users. So they have a pricing problem, which is a different problem. But what they realized is people from around the world, not just the US, not only are they watching Netflix, they're watching them on mobile devices, and they're interested in specific types of shows. So if you go on Netflix now, the types of shows that they produce, which are their best watched or viewed shows, are shows that they make based on the data they gather from their users. Netflix just launched its first show that is made in India, spoken in a Hindi language. That was the most watched show on Netflix because they knew that was the biggest growing population, and they made a show specifically for them. Right? So you have this on the right, what it should look like, but it's still getting there. And one of the things that we did is we did a real study on the innovation or startup economy around the world. And what you start realizing is there's $500 billion of capital wasted every year, primarily because the model for innovation that exists is old. It's a traditional, almost venture capital type of model. And what the abundance that they have is capital. So their mode of experimentation is to spend a lot of money and hope that 1 to 3% of these companies create enough of a return to cover the losses that they spend on it. But the world is shifting on how that works. So one of the things we do is we consult with with companies, corporations, entrepreneurs, governments on how to build and grow these companies. And one of the big things that's interesting, right, is if you are able to have the right filter to look at an idea, to mold it, to use these exponential technologies, to put teams around them that are complementary because of the skill sets you can achieve, you basically start going from linear to exponential. And one of the interesting things to think about is when you build or innovation, or when you're building a startup, or when you're trying to change the way things work, a lot of times the issue is in the measurement of how you measure success. So a lot of times we talk to people and they'll say, hey, you know what, our new manufacturing process gave us a 10% better efficiency in yield. So we're saving 10%, that's great. But that's not how innovation works. Innovation works in what we call the multiples, to go from exponential to linear, right? So can you make something 100 times faster? Can you make something 100 times cheaper? Can you make something 100 times more accessible? And that's when you start realizing that regardless of the industry that you're in, you have to have a game plan on how to leverage exponential technologies, along with what we call an exponential organization, which takes into account this new globally connected world, to actually build a company that is going to survive the forces that are coming. So, and we've done, one of the things that we decided to do was, when you think about the infrastructure of innovation, traditionally, it gets separated. You have a firm that'll do your strategy and the consulting, and then they'll basically give you, a big report on your desk and say, hey, thank you, now you figure out how to deliver. Then you go to somebody else and you say, hey, I need to build this, the strategy firm signed off on it, it's great, and you have this infrastructure that's not connected. So one of the things we wanted to do is put it all together. And then the other thing that we wanted to do is make sure we do it in a way that is cheaper and more efficient than being in Silicon Valley. So we want to bring the mindset of how to look at these ideas, how to build these companies to everyone. So that's the other thing that we've done. And we can talk about it later, but we've done a lot of companies. We have over 48 companies built. Over 40 of them have raised money for the next round. We've worked with a lot of corporations, et cetera, that drive a lot of value. So we basically go through different phases with companies on how to take them through this transformation. And we can talk about that later. The other thing that we talked about before was a lot of the innovation requires access to capital. As we started building these companies, we realized what we needed was our own fund that would look at ideas that either come from entrepreneurs or corporations. And what we realized a lot with corporations is they have a good business. That's why they're corporations, right? They do a lot of revenue. They've spent, in some cases, 50 to 100 years building a brand. They have, teams, they have infrastructure, they have factories, and you don't want to lose all that. So what we do with a lot of these companies is we do what we call companies on the edge of the organization. So a company that is not bogged down by the bureaucracy of a big company, because it takes process and discipline to run a big organization. But the way innovation works, it needs to be fast, it needs to be an experimentation or iteration-driven process, and you need to give the team that is working on those projects autonomy to be able to experiment. So we ended up saying, okay, we'll build for corporations on the edge or it's consulting, and if they become good companies, either we will fund them through our investment network or the company can decide to fund them. And in a lot of cases, the company decides to fund them. So it's become an interesting model for innovation because corporations are realizing that they are not nimble enough to build or innovate quickly. One of our partners, Salim, says, the first thing when you talk about innovation in a company is that there's an immune system against innovation. Primarily because success is measured either by the quarter or by your budget, right? So if you have a limited budget and you're measured in 3 months, it's very difficult to be very innovative. One of our key focuses over the last year has been Latin America, and there's a lot of factors that we think drive the growth in Latin America that is interesting from the entire innovation space. So one of the interesting things that I learned was the World Economic Forum and industry is defining what they call mega cities, right? There's 47 mega cities in the world. And out of those, 6 are found in Latin America. And the 15 other remaining mega cities are in China. So you start seeing the scale of urban density that Latin America is driving, right? The other thing is, what's happening from a societal shift is people are moving to these urbanly dense centers, to these mega cities. So, and what happens in those cities is people start using services that they would never have used before. So one of the big things we faced in Latin America even 6 years ago when we started was people would say, hey, this is great, but nobody in Latin America, and they would talk about it as a region, is going to use a phone to buy something. We don't trust it. There's no way we're going to call an Uber. There's no way I'm going to buy my groceries online. There's no way, right? But what started happening is that these people moved online. More people became mobile users. Those services became necessary. So we're at the stage with these mega cities and this urban density that the adoption time for new technology, for innovation, is shrinking tremendously in Latin America. And we're seeing that. For example, the Uber Eats, right? Uber Eats, when I think it was 4 years ago, thought about coming to Latin America, they were given the advice, that's a very expensive firms, not to do it. Because they basically said, nobody's going to order food in Latin America. It's culturally not what Latin America does. About a year and a half ago, they said, we're going to do it. And the adoption rate for Uber Eats, they said, was weeks, not even months. And that's because you have this urbanly dense population that requires these services because of how they live. And it drives another change in the consumer perspective, which is this mobile technology. So mobile technology is not unique to Latin America. But there's, if you look at the stats, over 200 million people already out of a region of over 700, if you count Brazil, are already smartphone users. And you start thinking about what I said about more and more people coming online, the huge growth in mobile and internet adoption is going to be driven by Latin America and Africa. So these two markets are going to become the huge scalable platform for innovation for a lot of companies. So the ability to allow adaptability through mobile technology, through increased penetration, is making Latin America a very attractive place. And as we talked about, from a cultural perspective, and this is not just for Latin America, we're seeing this in India, we're seeing this in Africa. The middle class is used to a model of service. As you go up in the class system, you're used to more service. But what's happening is mobile technology is cutting across these socioeconomic classes. So this inequality, along with this adaptability of technology, is driving new models of business. So you look at a simple example. So Lyft or Uber, right? They have a massive transformative purpose. And their transformative purpose is not to be the biggest taxi company in the world. Right? What they tell you when you go on the app the first time you use it is they say, everybody deserves a personal driver. Right? Something that 10 years ago only the rich people could do, which is have a personal driver. Now, if I have a few bucks and I have a smartphone, I can call my own personal driver. So that shift in access, that shift in mindset, the access to the mobile technology is driving a new mode of commerce. The other thing that's changing, especially with Latin America, is the rise of the gig economy. Right? People that are used to small tasks but are now able to access being an Uber driver, being a person that works for Postmates or the delivery service Rappi. All these people now have a new way of earning money where their phone is their workspace. So you're starting to see a new model of change that is being adopted in Latin America much faster than everybody thinks. The other thing that's really interesting too is the investment in this region in startups is growing tremendously. So there's, and a lot of this investment, by the way, is being driven by China in Latin America. So while the rest of the world, like the US and the European funds, are primarily focused on North America and the European market, the Chinese and the Indian investment firms are looking at the emerging markets. And the first place they're looking really is Africa and Latin America. So they're pumping a lot of money into this region. So you just start looking at the numbers, and if you look at the second last bullet point, right? Even in the last year alone, we built about 12 companies. 6 of them were from Latin America, compared to 3 from the year before and 1 the year before that. So we're starting to see a lot of changes in how people are starting to view building companies from this region. The other thing that has changed a lot for Latin America is the adoption of the blockchain. So, obviously, traditionally, people look at this and the first question we get is, is Bitcoin good or bad, or should I invest in Bitcoin or not? And that's a separate conversation, but the underlying technology is real. So the blockchain adoption in Latin America is one of the highest in the world. Primarily for exchanges like Ripio, right? Argentina has more businesses that accept Bitcoin than New York City. It's growing very fast in Latin America. So the consortiums or people that are starting to use blockchain as a mode of transactional currency and as a mode of investment currency is exploding in Latin America. So what are the big opportunities? Right? And then we'll try and get to questions quickly. But this is what we see as areas of change within the region that are very interesting in terms of using exponential technologies to accelerate the growth and the adaptability. So financial technology is obviously one of the key ones. When you look at the region as a whole, there's about 50% unbanked population. And all these people are moving to online banking, to blockchain-based or crypto-based economies. So, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with, but we were working with a few banks, and we had a meeting with Facebook a little while ago. So we sit down on the table with this guy from Facebook. He must have been, 25 years old. And we sit down with the heads of 2 banks and this guy. And he looks at us across the table and he says, we're going to have this meeting as friends, but we're probably going to be enemies in a few years. Right? And you start, and as we went through it, you start realizing that companies like Facebook, companies like Amazon, companies like Apple, PayPal, have so much information about their users, they do not need traditional banking models to do things like lend money to you. They know where you are. They know when your birthday is. They know that you're getting married. They know you're having a kid. They know your social capability to pay back a loan. They know what kind of car you like to drive. So with that type of ecosystem, do they really need a bank? They don't need a bank to basically allow you to transact, right? So everything from Apple Pay to Google Pay, they're thinking about much bigger things when it comes to disrupting fintech. And the blockchain is actually, doing a lot in terms of decentralizing traditional monopolies. We're seeing a lot of growth in automation and robotics from an industrial perspective in Latin America. And obviously we talked about mobile applications. But clean tech and mobility is actually very interesting. There's a lot of intersection in terms of biotech and nanotech. Even when it comes to things like cleaning ports, right? There's a lot of changes that are occurring in the industry, and obviously social impact is a big part of it. So, just to kind of summarize, right? We're living in this world where we already have 4 billion people connected on the internet, and there's going to be 4 billion more in the next few years. We have access to information at a scale that has never before been accessible to us, at speeds that are getting faster and faster and faster. And so what's happening is there's going to be a point where you're going to get away from paying for things, and you're going to want to be part of a platform where all companies are making money based on the amount of time and transactions you do on their ecosystem. And it's hard to imagine, but it's already starting to happen. So one of the things to think about is, even 5 years ago, we were just having this conversation in the car. 5 years ago, if my kid said, hey, I want to buy this game on my iPhone and it's 99 cents, I'd be like, no way, you're not buying another game. Today, the average user around the world, not North America alone, spends about $20 a month on applications, on subscription services, on transactions, primarily through mobile devices. So people are starting to shift where they spend their money to what is being driven by the technology that is being provided, right? The price of connectivity, like we talked about, is going to go low. And for corporations, they think that, look, this is not my marketplace, or we're not building solutions for these type of people. You're wrong, right? I mean, we've talked to everybody from oil and mining to construction to beer, right? It's a funny conversation we had with and we were talking to this group, and they said, hey, look, man, we make beer. People are never going to stop drinking beer. True, right? Probably true. How are they going to get that beer? So the guys were actually pretty smart. There was 2 guys in the room, and one of them said, hey, I know what we're going to do. We're going to build drone hangars, like in these different cities, and then we're going to basically fly people their beer whenever they call it on their app, like an Uber. And the other guy was like, man, I don't think that's what they're saying. And we said, what do you think? He's like, I think we need to build some sort of fridge or like some sort of device that people put in the house that you can download the recipes and just pour your own beer from the fridge. And this is already happening. There's the teams in MIT are making pizza from 3D printers. There's a team of girls from MIT that is printing cosmetics. You can buy their 3D printer and print lipstick at your house with whatever color you want. So the impact and the change is occurring much faster than everybody thinks. And I think I went over, but I hope I gave you kind of a good understanding of kind of the world that we're living in, what we're seeing when we talk to a lot of the experts when it comes to exponential technologies, when it comes to changing industries. And obviously with the focus on Latin America, we're very excited about the changes that we're seeing here. So maybe questions or whatever you want.
Thank you so much, Nabyl. This has been very, very encouraging, and also you're leaving us a lot of thoughts. I was wondering, 40% of the manufacturers represented by this chamber come from the food and beverage industries. You mentioned a little bit about beer. Here we have sugar, we have shrimps, we have tuna. How do you see those industries in all these technologies?
So,
You kind of mentioned it, but I would like to...
I see a lot of changes, and you look at those traditional industries, and there's changes that are occurring in different aspects of the industry. So one of the big changes we're seeing is in logistics, right? So all the way from, we were dealing with luxury rice. And all the way, one of the issues they had was from the farm to the train to the plane to when it actually gets to the end spot, the amount of loss that they were seeing was something that they just decided to accept. Because they basically said this is how business works. So IBM and a few other groups started putting together these blockchain-based solutions to actually measure and verify the transactions from each stage of the process, from farm to delivery. And through that pilot, for example, they reduced that churn from 97% or so to less than 10%. So the first impact we're seeing is in the logistics, in the delivery, in the verification of the process. And the other side, obviously, is the industrial manufacturing, the farm, the equipment, all the way from things like the nanotechnology. For example, we were looking at the technology with drones and computer vision to basically detect anomalies within a field. Is a crop going to be devastated because we're seeing signs of either pests or weather change? So we're starting to see a lot of different pieces. I don't know, Herman, if you have anything else
I think also we've seen a lot of pricing
Yes.
of materials that sometimes gets lost between the intermediaries. That can be made much more efficient, transparent, from the agriculture to the impact of buying material. Robotics, as we were saying, right? Sensors are all impacting this type of industries.
A lot of sensor technologies coming to manufacturing to industry. They're saying 100 trillion sensors in the next 5 years. So, which is interesting because basically what they're saying is you're not going to be able to lie. Right? Like, we actually have a company that right now, if we were doing this and we had the beacon here, it would be able to tell me on my screen how many men, how many women, which is great. But more interesting is it tells me whether you're happy or you're sad, or you're actually paying attention. So you start thinking about sensors in all these different industries. It's going to change the way we do that business.
And then transportation, the last mile delivery, big cities have become a problem that everybody wants to solve. That could be places around the city that lowers those costs and improves.
It's changing mobility, like the rise of the scooter. Like you're seeing it in Latin America, it's in the US and everywhere. I mean, you go to San Francisco, nobody's in an Uber. Like people have these little scooters, you pay $2 to go 20 blocks. And all those companies are coming here. It's changing the way people are moving in what we call those mega cities. Right?
Nabyl, I have a question. Every time that I listen to you, I feel a sense of our industries are going to be disruptive, and I think that's a good thinking that we should have in order to prevent our industries from getting destroyed, and see the way that we can see ourselves in the future. And my question is, most of the people here in the audience are connected to industries. And we're in a small country compared to China and other countries. So the way that we can scale up in order to give our products to this increasing market is a very difficult task. So my question when I listen to you is mainly, should we think about how can we scale up to the new markets that now is global, it's a global market? Or do you think we should think in another way to see where our industry, which in most cases are probably going to be disrupted, for example, in the case of plastics and some others. So what's your suggestion? Should we move to another, should we think in another way, or
So we recommend two
to
things, right?
scale up?
So that, like, what I was saying before is you build probably industries where you built a brand, you have an infrastructure, you have a revenue stream that is existing right now. So the scale-up approach is definitely one that you have to do. It's almost, you have to inevitably try and scale that part of your business, whether it's by using the blockchain or other technologies to increase the market size or different pieces. But on the other hand, what we encourage people to do a lot is that core part of your business, you're going to have to maintain and try and grow in that linear path. But on the flip side, you have a lot of assets within what you've built that you're probably not realizing are useful. And that's where the orthogonal impact of exponential technologies with the industry that you're in is probably where the growth for the future is going to come for your company. So, you start, you think about, like just a different example, but Microsoft, like 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, was the king of software in corporations. And the way it worked was you had to buy Microsoft products. So your company was probably a Microsoft company, right? But what ended up happening is all these cheap software started coming into play, and people started demanding other software. So the new CEO of Microsoft, when he came in about 3 years ago, for the first time in Microsoft's history, said, we're not a software company. We're a connectivity company. So Microsoft is going to play with Oracle, is going to play with Salesforce, is going to play with the new startup that comes from the street. And that changed their business model. So now they're not charging that much for the software, but they're charging for cloud access to Microsoft's Azure cloud. So in the same way, and that's actually, if you look at their stock price now, it's through the roof, it's going to change how you're going to look at your business. So those different sides of your business you have to look at, and then create where we go through what we call a think phase. We apply technology concepts to the business you have and come up with a business that is probably going to be an offshoot of your business that basically takes over. And that's a big way of how we change companies.
And the same thing happened to IBM.
The same thing happened to IBM. Exactly. So, and these are the software, just people never thought IBM was going to go anywhere. And they're barely recovering. They made their entire artificial intelligence platform free because they want more people to come back and use their technology. So the models are changing. So I would, we recommend to do the linear growth, but then also really definitely look at the orthogonal impacts that technology provides and possibly change their industry. We're looking at a company, we were working with a company, I don't know if I can give you their name, but this company had a $23 billion market cap. $23 billion market cap. We can talk about it, right? So the company is Black & Decker, right? Black & Decker is a big global company, $23 billion market cap in the stock market. Their stock is pretty standard. And when you sit with them, you start realizing one thing. The way they scale their business is they bought every brand they could buy. So if you go in a hardware store, it may say DeWalt, it may say something else, but it's all Black & Decker. And they got to a point where they said, look, our brand is very well known around the world, we're very respected, but we cannot move our value one penny we have bought every brand. People buy our stuff. You know, toolsmen all around the world love it, but they couldn't change the business model. So we started looking at that, and one of the things we realized was they actually have tradesmen that are there's a community around people that want to use Black & Decker tools. But Black & Decker did not know who that end consumer was, because they were selling through dealers. So they had no idea that, you know, this guy on the street loved Black & Decker, he has a Black & Decker sticker on his car, you know, these are the tools he uses on his job. And so we went through this process with them, and we realized, hey, you have a good brand, and you have an asset you're not leveraging, which is the end consumer, which is the people that actually use your tools. So we've been working with them on creating a company that's actually spun off now as a company on the edge of their organization that is now building a business to provide financial services to the tradesmen. So nothing to do with, you know, the tools per se, but leveraging the brand to create a new company that is, you know, going to be a big part of the business going forward.
Good morning. What would be your suggestion about closing the gap that currently exists between the entrepreneur who's living in our emerging economies and those capital that currently resides in more developed countries? How do you put the two together?
I think it's a good question. I think it's going to be the other way around. The capital is coming here. So before, even 1 or 2 years ago, that was not the case. But now, everybody's starting to see the growth that is occurring in these regions. So even, for example, our fund looks primarily at emerging markets. You look at all, like, you know, Techstars, you look at all these companies, while their focus is primarily North America, they're starting to trickle down. So there's two things. One, funds are coming this way. But two, the entrepreneurs now have access to the rest of the world, right? I mean, like we were saying, I don't know if you saw the slide, but last year was the most companies from Latin America that went through Y Combinator, through Techstars, and through us. So these companies are making their way out there. Now, what's true is only the best of them will make it out there. So as opposed to kind of the spray and pray approach that's in the rest of the world, it's the cream of the crop that's basically coming up and getting access to that capital quickly. But that gap is shrinking, primarily because from the fund side, we need the supply of those good ideas at valuations that are attractive. So the average seed valuation in the US, based on the latest data from PitchBook, is about $7 million for a company that has a team and an initial product. So as an investor, you know, if you're going to invest $700,000 in that company, you own 10% of the company, and then it's going to go through a bunch of rounds. That same company coming out of Latin America, if it has the team and the product, is anywhere from $2.5 to $5 million. So automatically there's a leverage to be gained for investors investing in those companies, and then bringing them through their networks, which is what we do, into the US, into the UK, into the rest of the world. So that gap is shrinking, and I think the best way to answer it is good companies are going to get discovered.
Yo quería mencionarles que con Ricardo Novoa venimos trabajando con Rocker, somos partners de Rocker, y venimos trabajando 3 años con la compañía. Y quería decirles con optimismo que aquí en Ecuador, no puedo entrar en mucho detalle y no creo que venga el caso, pero sí puedo mencionarles un ejemplo para que ustedes vean que lo que ha dicho Nabyl no es una charla que, digamos, viene y bien, este es el mundo de hoy, cambia rápido y el ritmo de cambio es rápido y aquí en Ecuador como que la cosa no cambia demasiado. Puedo mencionar un caso para que ustedes vean que también puede ser el de ustedes. Seguros Confianza. Seguros Confianza es una compañía de seguros y no tiene seguros masivos, sino que participa en un nicho, que es el nicho de fianzas y seguros de crédito. Y son líderes de mercado, y en un mercado pequeño. Y Javier hace ya algún tiempo, 2 años, nos dijo, ¿qué hago? Porque solamente ya tengo la segunda generación en el negocio, mis hijos son muy preparados, están aquí, entendemos este mundo muy bien, y qué aburrido defender esta compañía por el resto de nuestros días, porque es que no podemos hacer nada más. No vamos a entrar a seguros de crédito, a seguros masivos, ni mucho menos, sino a defender el nicho, que es muy rentable, es muy riesgoso, lo hacemos mejor que nadie, pero en algún momento alguien va a entrar a competirnos. Entonces hay que defender lo que tenemos, pero ¿qué hacemos? Y solamente quiero comentarles, para no alargarme yo y más bien que ustedes sigan interactuando, pero para que vean que en Ecuador están pasando muchas cosas, y estoy poniendo solo un ejemplo. Con Javier creamos una compañía, y que solo la puedo mencionar porque ya está en el mercado, que se llama SideTrust. No vende un seguro, sino que es básicamente una plataforma para, a través de una serie de actores en la plataforma, disminuir el riesgo cibernético de una compañía, y que a través de la misma plataforma pueda conseguir más barato un seguro que cubra su riesgo cibernético. El mercado de SideTrust es global, ya no compite Javier en Ecuador, sino que apunta a un mercado global, y hemos visto que han salido justo los últimos 3 meses 2 compañías igualitas a SideTrust, que ofrecen lo mismo, y eso nos da a pensar de que cuando pensamos en esta compañía y vimos la oportunidad hace 2 años, se la enfocó correctamente, es por aquí. Entonces solamente quiero mencionarles ese ejemplo para que ustedes vean que por mucho que ustedes digan, sí, pero estoy en una industria tan antigua como el comercio, o yo qué sé, o cualquier cosa de esta, porque lo he escuchado, en las cadenas de valor de cada una de sus industrias van a haber problemas que con tecnología se pueden solucionar, y hay negocios importantes que se pueden hacer para beneficio de los accionistas, de la sociedad, de todos. Entonces quería mencionar eso un poco para también aterrizarlo a nuestra propia realidad, ¿no?
Solo voy a agregar que esa compañía está en Inglaterra, ¿no? Se la decidió poner en Inglaterra y no acá. Entonces, todo esto es, o sea, como una empresa ecuatoriana, tengo una compañía en Inglaterra, empiece allá, de un mercado enorme que genere tracción. O sea, esas posibilidades antes eran difíciles de realizar, digamos, ¿no? Como yo hago mi compañía allá. Hoy es más fácil que nunca.
No sé si alguien más tiene una pregunta. Sí, alguien.
Nabyl, thank you for your presentation. I'm always amazed at how things, what the outlook of the world is. We're industrials here, and most of our companies are very traditional. How would you suggest us to seriously start exploring exponential technologies in our companies? What type of teams, structures, or capital that we need just to get a gist so we can know what to aim for?
So it's a good question, and I think it starts from education within the company. So the first thing that we have to do when we speak to corporations is people don't speak the same language when it comes to innovation, and that creates a big friction within the team. So all the way, even the term exponential technologies, like people don't understand. They think, hey, we're just going to use computers to do this, and you have to start thinking of how to educate the team first on what that means. And usually what we try and do is say, look, take the leaders in the company and we run them through what we call an education program. And the first thing we do is make sure that they are all speaking the same thing, and that they are all evaluating progress based on the same metrics. So it's very important that if you run a business and you have a board or you have a family that's managing the business, that family is measuring the success of innovation based on the same metrics. The thing that's important to understand is the bottom part of an exponential curve is linear. Let me explain what that means, right? So when you think about exponential, right, you go from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16, but that bottom part is almost below a linear growth of 10-20% a year. But there comes a point where that 16 or 32 becomes 64, 128, that bypasses that linear growth. And what happens with a lot of companies is they cannot measure or understand the time or the investment it'll take to get to that inflection point of the growth. So the first thing is to get everybody on the same page. The second thing is, and this is our process, and what we do is we sit with the company, with the team, and we understand what their core competencies are and what assets they have in their existing business that can be leveraged to create a new exponential business. Either to change the existing business or to create a new one. And that process, we usually if teams do it on their own, it takes a lot of time. And like you said, who do you hire? It's not like you can go out and hire somebody that, is an innovation expert. Those are difficult hires to make within your company. Or a chief technology. Like, what does a chief technology person that's been in business for 20 years today know about how kids are accessing APIs to Watson to build chatbots? You can learn it, but it's not like you know it, right? So what we do is we run companies through a 4 to 8 week process. And we call it a think phase. And we call it a think phase for a very specific reason. We don't want to start the experimentation process until we've evaluated what we can change within the company to create that exponential growth. During that process, we look at a few different things. Primarily, we're looking at what exponential technologies we can use to combine with the assets that you already have. The second thing we're looking at is what experiments can we run to create the right product market fit. Like the example Ernesto was talking about with confianza, right? It's a tangential business, right? And we decided that the experts in that insurance business are in the UK. So our network is global. One of the things that we've been able to do over the last 7 years is we have hundreds of people that want to work with Rocker from a technology perspective to a leadership perspective to a strategist perspective because they want to be part of building something new. So our recruitment is, we don't say, hey, we need an insurance expert for this business. No, we say, hey, we need somebody that understands how to build a marketplace online and create partnerships. And that's a different type of person that we can use to apply to this technology. So we go through that think phase to figure out the product market fit, what experiments to run, and what the initial build will look like. We try and build that initial product within between 6 and 8 months to get to market. Sometimes it takes 4, sometimes it takes 12, but within a very short time frame, much shorter than a traditional innovation project in a company would take. And the reason why is we encourage everybody to use a startup mentality, which is very difficult for a lot of corporations to understand. And the startup mentality is not about being able to fail quickly. It's actually about defining the right experiments so you learn what works. And that's the hardest part for companies to do. They don't know what metrics to put in place so they can measure the progress of innovation. So we do that, and then we say, okay, this is what it's going to take, and then if the company wants to do that, we then put a team around their expertise. So usually if you're in an industry or if you have a business, you will provide the functional or subject matter area expertise. And we provide the exponential expertise, whether it's technology, product market fit, running the experiments, or going to market. And then within those 6 to 8 months, we try and get traction. And traction could be many different things. It may not be that I'm going to get $1 in services, in revenue. It might be we want to get 50,000 users. Or it might be I want to build this product and demo it to 10 people who say they're going to use it. And then at that stage, we're going to say, okay, now we're going to need more money. We can bring our fund, you can bring your investment, and we say, okay, we're going to build this company together. We like to take equity positions in these new companies that we build, primarily so we can align, our incentives. So traditionally, if you go work, if you work with somebody and they say, hey, we don't want to extend projects because I believe innovation needs to be quick. But at the same time, I want to be incentivized to participate in the growth of that company. So, and that's the new world. You bring somebody on to run this new company, they want to participate kind of in the future, right? So we go through a process of dealing with innovation like a startup would think about it, with the speed a startup would attack it, with the urgency a startup would attack it, and we try and use what you have, the assets, the networks, the infrastructure, the capabilities to build something that becomes exponential quickly.
¿Alguien más quería hacer una pregunta a Nabyl? Nabyl, thank you so much for bringing the new world to this room, to our minds. I'm sure we will never forget what you have been telling us this morning. And thank you, thanks to Ricardo for letting us be part of this new ideas. I hope we will be able to work with you also, thinking on what can be done in this new world. Thank you, Nabyl. Wish you a very nice day. Have you been in Guayaquil before?
Once, very, very brief.
Okay, hope you enjoy the city too.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.